Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking about anime episodes 193 through 195, which will be covering manga chapters 299 to 303. And this will be the last episode of the year, as I'll go on break for the holidays for the next couple weeks, and we'll be back with a new episode in January. But with that, we are going into the conclusion of the Skypiea arc with this podcast as we say farewell to the Sky Island. Okay, so the synopsis. After the defeat of Enel and the ringing of the Golden Bell marks the end of Enel's reign, as well as the centuries-long message finally reaching Nolan's descendant Cricket and freeing the citizens of Skypiea as well as the Shandians. The Strawhats and the people all recover and party it up and get ready to move on to the next adventure, but not before Robin makes a startling discovery. Okay, so the difference is there are actually a decent number of them with this set of episodes. So one strange detail they changed in the anime is the clothes and outfit of the various Straw Hats towards the end here. Robin, for example, is wearing something completely different. In the anime, she's wearing this wavy striped maroon colored jacket and a purple corset-like shirt that's split down the middle held together with this cross-stitching. But in the manga, she's wearing a light green tank top and a black leather jacket, which is completely different. And yeah, I also know the color of that manga because she's actually on the cover of Volume 32 wearing that same outfit. The other place where the outfits are changed is that in episode 194, Sanji, Nami, and Zoro are all wearing their correct outfits from the manga. But then when they're getting ready to leave on their way to the Cloud End, they've changed outfits as well. I'm not sure why these were changed, other than maybe they wanted the characters to be wearing their more traditional outfits for the upcoming filler arc, but it still doesn't quite make sense. Another change they made around this same time is the conversation about what they want to do with all the treasure that they just recovered actually takes place before they fall, as they're sort of floating towards the Cloud End in the manga. But in the anime, this takes place after they've already fallen and they're currently, gliding their way down. And again, I don't really know why this was changed, because pacing-wise, it makes no difference because it occurs in the same exact episode. Then the big change is the last half of the episode 195, where there's this whole section dedicated to them floating down, but this is vastly shorter in the manga, as in the manga it just plays out where they fall, and they have that comical scene, and then the next time we see them, they've already basically just slammed down in the water, and the whole thing with the octopus shrinking and them trying to keep themselves afloat, none of that actually happens in the manga. But also in the anime, they land in the marine base as opposed to in open waters in the manga. Obviously, this is to set up for the next filler arc, the G8 filler arc, so that's pretty much why that was changed. The last thing I wanted to mention, though, is in the manga, in its place is a short scene filling us in on what happened with Bellamy back on Jaya, which I won't go into here to avoid spoilers. But there's a section in this particular moment where we actually get to see what became of Bellamy and his crew. Alrighty, so my thoughts on these episodes. These episodes pick up right where we ended last episode as the bell rings loudly for all to hear, with everyone getting emotional at how beautiful the sound is, but also that it represents peace for the first time in over 400 years. And my favorite part in all of Skypiea, however, is the next scene when we cut to Cricket and the monkeys hearing the bell all the way down on the seafloor back on Jaya. It's then explained the reason for those massive shadows we saw at the very beginning of the saga/arc were the Shandian shadows being magnified from all the way up in the sky, setting up this next beautiful moment in an amazing payoff for nearly 60 episodes later, with the bell ringing in the sky and Cricket putting together everything that Nolan in fact wasn't a liar and the city of gold was up in the sky, and then we pull back to see the massive shadow of Luffy falling through the sky, confirming it all with Cricket and the monkeys beaming with pride and happiness. Usually that's where a scene like that ends in a normal story, but not One Piece. Oda adds in a really touching and emotional moment that really endears you again to his characters, and it makes the scene pretty unforgettable for me at least. And it's how Cricket breaks down crying, being so relieved that these crazy kids he may have sent on a dangerous adventure were in fact all right. it's a really powerful moment that, again, having that gruff and tough demeanor, he really cares for people and is a good guy all around, just like his ancestor Nolan. And that while it was great for him to finally have the proof that his family isn't a legacy of just lies, it didn't even compare to the joy and relief he felt knowing that Luffy and the Straw Hats were alive and well. And to me, this scene is always just so touching because for us, it was, also just a sigh of relief too, because Skypiea is such a long story arc. And to us, we also felt the immense amount of buildup and tension, and we finally get to see the release of all that emotion and tension, combined with Luffy wondering if the bell reached the guys down below, and Nami confirming that it probably did, and it's just all around an amazing moment, and always brings a tear to my eye. We then get a quick shot of Enel's arc and the bell sinking into the cloud sea, but we'll get to those a little later. In the meantime, we see everyone take refuge on the upper yard as Angel Isle is now gone, and absurdly, everyone is still alive, including the Shandian warriors. Like, again, this is where Oda's proclivity to avoid killing characters, shows up. And like I've mentioned before, at this point, you're just kind of assuming anyone shown to have quote-unquote died will be alive by the end of the arc. And I've said it many times as it, kind of cheapens those dramatic quote-unquote deaths. But by this point, it's just something I've come to accept with his writing. Isa and Lucky are reunited in a touching moment along with all the others, while Chopper attends to Wiper, who by all accounts should probably be dead too. And I never grow tired of the running joke that everyone thinking Chopper is a raccoon, with Isa cutely asking him if Wiper will be alright and calling him Raccoon-chan or Tanuki-chan. And Chopper is like, I'm a reindeer, see? Antlers! And yeah, I don't know why, but I'll never get tired of that. I think it's mostly because I grew up watching Doraemon, and in that series, everybody thinks Doraemon is a raccoon, even though he's always adamant that he's a robot modeled after a cat. We then get Konis, Nami, and Luffy showing up with a massive bag of food, and when I say massive, I mean this thing is comically massive. And I always find it, pretty funny that Konis seems like she's helping pull this thing, as it's so big and heavy. Luffy has got to be doing like 95% of the work here. But I also like the detail that Nami isn't even trying. She's just kind of running alongside it. Well, at least Konis is pretending, I think, to, help pull that thing. It's a really subtle way of, indicating their characters. We then get what's supposed to be a sad and emotional moment with Konis telling everyone the sacrifice her father Pagaya made. But then it's played for laughs as he's among everyone else who's concerned for Konis, as he's hilariously revealed to be alive still. And I'll be honest, I remember laughing pretty hard at this the first time. But for me, this has kind of become a meh moment for me. Like, while I am really happy to see Pagaya alive because I really like him, and I think his death being undone, though, has, the biggest impact in terms of Konis' character. And that moment earlier where she, mustered her strength to do what she had to do to save everyone on the Angel Isle, despite having just witnessed her father die, I don't know, it kind of, lessens the moment, I guess, in my eyes. It's almost on par as bad as when Oda brought back Pell in Alabasta. But, nowadays this moment kind of just gets a light chuckle out of me because of this. But yeah, it just keeps reminding me of the fact that, that moment doesn't really mean much to me anymore. There's then a scene after the Skypians and Shandians kind of contemplate their futures, where the Straw Hats have just finished eating. And there's honestly nothing at all significant about this scene except just similar to the bonfire scene from about midway through the arc. I just love moments where Luffy and Usopp rally together about ridiculously stupid things and get all high and mighty and condescending towards Nami, who's always thinking pragmatically. And it's just funny hearing Luffy judge people and kind of lecture them because it's such a departure from his normal self. And yeah, it's really funny to see him just kind of condescendingly lecture Nami. It's pretty funny. This next moment is actually quite a shocker, as we see Enel is still alive and his Arc Maxim is still flying, and he's rambling on like a crazy person about returning home to the the home of the gods and the fairy birth, of course meaning the moon. And he's actually heading to the moon, like the real moon, which begs the question, can he actually make it there? And also, can he breathe in space? I guess I just assumed he'd just keep falling down to the sea. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with him now that he's actually on his way to the moon. Of course, we'll get to that during his cover story a little bit later on down the line. And with that, we get the finally long-awaited celebration party. These scenes always fill me with joy as we follow Wiper waking from his injuries and seeing and hearing fire and war drums, but in fact it was all for a party and not a battle. Seeing everyone, the Strawhats, Shandians, Skypeans all together, I don't know, just makes your heart really full after seeing what they've all had to endure, and the tragic legacy of Calgara and Nolan's lost friendship finally being passed on and rekindled with their descendants. Overall, it's a really great moment, and I love how the episode ends on this in a very triumphant note with an orchestral version of We Are playing in the background. Once the party wraps up and everyone is asleep, Luffy sneaks over to Nami in the dead of the night to wake her up so they can go after the gold. And we get a really funny moment after trying to be all sneaky. Nami freaks out and screams upon learning that there's still gold left somewhere in the snake, and Luffy scolds her that she's being too loud. Then Nami gets all offended and yells back at Luffy that he's being too loud, and then eventually this devolves into a yelling match as to who's louder and who caused the loudness to begin with. Then Usopp eventually wakes up and starts yelling at them both for waking him up and telling them to shut up, and it's just like everybody just wakes up anyways, but they just assume that the Straw Hats are again partying just again, and this whole scene just gets me laughing every time. Once morning arrives, the golden bell is eventually found, and then there's this great moment where both Shandians, along with the help of Skypeans, come together to lift it out of the cloud sea. But next we get a really cool and significant moment where Usopp trades material from the world below for the Sky Island's dials. But the hilarious part is that the Skypeans are all enamored with rubber, since they don't have it up there, and that was the thing that essentially defeated Enel, so Usopp ends up getting a bunch of dials to upgrade his gear, and he even mentions upgrading Nami's climb attack just for a bunch of rubber bands. And it's going to be really fun to see how Usopp incorporates these into his arsenal and how buffed Nami's weapon gets. I think this is cool how these two continue to get stronger, because obviously they're not going to get physically stronger by training or learning new techniques like the main other 5 members who used physical power to, overwhelm their opponents. And so these two rely on getting stronger through gear and smarts, and I love this sort of natural progression that Oda introduces here for Usopp and Nami. Zoro, again continuing on from Alabasta, discovers a new strength that he needs to attain, this time not just being able to cut things that are uncuttable, but now he needs to be able to cut something that has no form. It'll be interesting to see how this culminates when he puts it all together, as it is foreshadowing that there will be something that can be developed that will allow people to actually hit Logia fruit users, potentially. I mean, how can there not be? Otherwise, fights in One Piece would just devolve into a boring Pokemon typing, like rock, paper, scissors meta. But also, in this very same scene, I love the prank that Usopp plays on Zoro with the tone dial. I mean, it's just stupid, but it's pretty funny. Then we get probably the most significant moment in this arc to the overall story of One Piece, with the discovery of the Poneglyph embedded into the Golden Bell. Robin then arrives to tell us everyone that the Shandians are the guardians of this Poneglyph, which explains why the bell has been so intertwined with their history and culture, as it has been for hundreds of years their duty to protect it and pass on the information inscribed on it, and that this Poneglyph, to Robin's disappointment, indicates that there is another ancient weapon, this time named after the god Poseidon, and the Poneglyph also seems to indicate where it is, but Robin does not actually disclose where it is. This now makes 2 ancient weapons, Pluton, obviously named after the Greek god Pluto, from Alabasta's Poneglyph, and now Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, from this Skypiea Poneglyph. I mean, we don't really know what these weapons are for, but before Robin leaves, she finds an extra set of carvings written on the side of the bell base, mysteriously and unbelievably left by the Pirate King himself, Goldie Roger. I mean, this is huge. Like, Roger was not only in Skypiea, but he somehow managed to figure out how to read and write this ancient text, said to only be readable by Robin herself right now at this point in the world. And just as we predicted, the pirate that Gunfall met all those years back was in fact Roger, and he not only says that, but he also mentions that Luffy somehow reminds him a lot of Roger, which is an obvious but nice connection to the Pirate King. But on it, Roger writes, "I made it here. I will guide this text to the ends of the earth." And then upon reading this, Robin is shocked but starts to theorize by saying that there are 2 types of poneglyphs, one that contain information and those indicating where those are. Taking Roger's message, she theorizes that the real poneglyph isn't just one block containing all the history and information, but is in fact comprised when you gone around the world and collected all the information contained in the poneglyphs and read them in succession. It begins to show the true history of the Void Century. All this is super interesting as Robin has finally found a renewed life in her dead dream. She now has to go around the Grand Line and find the remaining info on the poneglyphs and combine them with the ones that Roger found that he left in Laugh Tale to finally learn the true history of the Void Century. And I also want to make a note that in the Crunchyroll subs, they still translate Laugh Tale as Raft Tale, which is very interesting. Now, I know I haven't really talked too much about the ancient weapons yet, and now that there's two, even at this point, though, I'm still not going to get too much into the ancient weapons because at this point, there's still very little we know about them. But I do have some really scattered thoughts and like weird theories about what they could be and what their purpose is. But I mean, even with the knowledge that I have now, with everything up to where I am in chapters 1035, it's still somewhat of a mystery to me. So again, you could probably find better theory craft videos on YouTube or other podcasts that go into this a little bit more because I'm not really much of a theory crafter. But yeah, so I'll definitely get into it a little bit more because more stuff concerning the ancient weapons comes up very soon, actually. So we'll definitely get into a little bit more of that. But upon learning this, Robin lets the people of Shandian know that they no longer need to fight to basically protect this poneglyph because Roger's already taken this information to Laugh Tale, and so they're relieved that they can now end this war and that their duty has been fulfilled. And the people of the Sky Island all decide as thanks, they want to give the Strawhats that big gold pillar to them. And I always thought, this thing is so absurdly big. Like, how the hell are they supposed to sail with this thing, let alone get it back down? I mean, it's like twice the size of the Going Merry. It's like, what? I feel like even like a quarter of that thing would still be too big. But I guess, they wanted to give that to them. But I love the joke that they all think that when they're approaching the Straw Hats with this huge pillar, that Usopp and Chopper automatically think that they're angry at them and they're chasing them with a massive cannon. I don't know why, but this is just funny to me. Something I really love about this scene, though, is it always brings a genuine smile to my face when I see Robin, genuinely enjoying herself and really loving being part of the crew with this kind of renewed sense of purpose and a crew she finally loves and can trust after being alone for so long. Like, it's a stark contrast from just one arc ago where she was ready to abandon her dream and even her life. And now she's just smiling and running with the crew with this new found sense of purpose in her dream. And I love it. Like, it's so nice to see Robin, with this, like, a genuine smile on her face. We also get a touching moment with Isa as she was one of the few people who was able to say thank you and goodbye to the Straw Hats. I will say, when I saw her without her hat, I didn't expect her hair to be that color or that hairstyle. I don't know what I was expecting, but maybe it would be more normal like Lucky's hair. And I also like the nice and funny callback to her resisting being more feminine and cute because she's a Shandian warrior at heart. But I also love how she makes the same face Pierre does now with the square jaw and the teeth. As if, hanging around with Pierre for so long, she adopted that horse face. But yeah, I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of Isa. Just like with Vivi, I think their relationship has grown a little bit stronger. Maybe not to the extent of Vivi, but I think Isa will come back at some point. And the thing is when Isa was first introduced in the arc, she comes across as really annoying, and I didn't really necessarily like her character all that much either. But it's crazy how as the arc went on, you kind of just slowly grew on, she grows on you throughout the arc to the point where by the end where it's, I actually really like Isa as a character. Like, she doesn't really do much, but she has a good heart, and I just like characters like that. And finally, we get some final resolutions to a couple remaining character threads as Wiper and his crew vow to still uphold the pride of Shandora. And also with Gunfall, he's finally rewarded with all the hard work he put into trying to broker a peace for years, and he reluctantly but happily takes over the seat of God once again over the new Skypiea, with the support for both the Skypeans and the Shandians united as one people now, just as he wanted years ago. And speaking of Gunfall, I kind of wanted to just kind of take this moment to say, rest in peace to Joji Yanami, the voice actor of Gunfall, as well as Boodle in the Orange Island arc. And yeah, he passed away very recently on December 3rd at the age of 90. And yeah, he'll definitely be missed because I loved his voice. He was, for the longest time, he was the voice of King Kai in Dragon Ball. He was also the narrator, and he was Boodle and Gunfall. And his voice is iconic, and yeah, he'll be definitely missed. With that though, Konis and Pagaya guide and see out the Straw Hats. Then the original South Bird that they used to get up there shows up, demanding that they take him back to sea and not forget him. And this next moment has probably got to be one of my favorite panels or shots, as they didn't realize that it's a vertical drop all the way back down. And so we get a freeze frame of the crew just about to drop and freak the hell out with their eyeballs popping out of their heads, trying to catch up with their falling bodies. But what gets me the most is that the Mary's figurehead is also doing the exact same thing, joining them. And you can even see its mouth open agape with its eyeballs sticking out too. And like when you see that, it's just such a funny picture. It's so funny. I don't know. I love how they sort of anthropomorphize the Going Merry a little bit with the figurehead, because it does feel like a true member of the crew, and it's pretty funny when it does make those sort of weird faces. However, they are saved when Konis calls in a balloon octopus that will float them down safely to the sea. And in an awesome form of symmetry to Nolan leaving without the Shandians being able to say goodbye, but this time on much happier terms, the Skypians ring the golden bell to show them their appreciation and their farewells, just like they did for Nolan. And in conclusion to Cricket and the monkey story, we see them saying that their adventure is over, but then just when they think that this is the end of their relationship with Cricket, he proposes to them what romantic adventure should they pursue next. And it's these heartfelt moments that make One Piece so special, like I mentioned earlier. And they go just one step further in sort of creating these sort of great character moments and just these great emotional moments and scenes. And yeah, I always love these things, and that's kind of why I really love One Piece, is because it makes you feel stuff. Like, the feels are real with this series, and they set them up and pay them off so well. They're not like just cheap ones. They take their time, and that's one of the reasons why One Piece's like payoffs are so immensely satisfying, is because it takes their time to build. But with that, the Straw Hats all float back down to Earth, and they accidentally land in what appears to be a marine base where the episode ends. And yeah, that is the conclusion to the Skypiea saga / arc. And what an arc it was. Again, I definitely fall in the camp of those that like Skypiea. And yeah, I disagree that Skypiea is either too long or boring, or I definitely vehemently disagree that it should be skipped. Like, nothing canon should ever be skipped in One Piece, to be honest. And I feel like I've just proved that with this episode because of the fact that you learn about the Poneglyphs and Roger being up here. So yeah, that's a pretty major plot point that needs to be known to understand the rest of the story. But yeah, we now move on to our next adventure as we see the Straw Hats find themselves in a marine base in this next filler story arc. But that will have to wait till next year, as like last year, I'll be taking a several week break for the holidays and return with new episodes in January. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone this year. The growth and support of this podcast has just been incredible this year, and I appreciate all of you for listening to the podcast. I mean, I've gained so many subscribers and supporters over just this last year, and it's been incredible, so thank you very much. I love making this podcast, and I love sharing my love for One Piece with all of you each week, and I can't wait for next year, as we've got some great stories to cover. Coming up next year, I'll be back starting with my Skypiea arc review. We also need to cover the Wapol cover story arc, as well as obviously the next few episodes with the G8 filler arc, then moving into what is so far my favorite stretch of episodes in all of One Piece, with the beginning of the long ring, long land. That's always so hard to say. The Davy back fight, Water 7, and the NES lobby arcs. Like, oh my god, I cannot wait to talk about all these episodes in 2022. Again, if you enjoyed this, send me a like or comment, and if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast if you want updates on when I post new episodes, or see some pictures of my manga collection. You can check those out as well. And we'll have a spoiler section here, as there's a pretty decent amount to talk about. But if you don't want to hear about any of those, feel free to sign off here. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again for taking the time to listen to my podcast. And I hope to see you on the next episode. And I hope you all have a safe and great holiday as well. Bye. Alrighty, so spoiler section. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the Zoro training to cut something that has no physical form, which obviously he's referring to Logia users. And so, yeah, obviously, those of you who have read or watched up to the post-time skip era, we know that they would go on to learn the concept of armament or Busosho Haki, which would allow them to hit Logia users, including Zoro himself. And so, yeah, I thought, it's interesting now that both the Alabasta fight and the Skypiea fight has now sort of made Zoro aware of the concepts of sort of the haki, because he's now learning to sense the rhythm of things so that he can cut through things that he normally couldn't. And then also he's trying to learn how to cut through things that actually don't have physical form, which would also both kind of encompassing the concept of haki. So I thought this was a nice foreshadowing of all of that. And of course the big thing is Goldie Roger being up in Skypiea, and we'd go on to see this finally happen and get told as to like how he got there and how he was able to write all of that. And yeah, we found out in the Oden flashback that because Oden decided to follow Roger on his journey again through the Grand Line, this time to find Laugh Tale and to collect the poneglyphs, that is how he was able to find it and read it, and also be able to write in those in the ancient text. It wasn't actually him, it was Oden who actually wrote all of that stuff for him. But yeah, it's interesting to see that. Obviously I'm not going to go too much into the detail about all of that, but it is pretty cool that we get to see Roger look for all the road poneglyphs and collect as many as he could and bring them to Laugh Tale. Presumably, with what Robin's already found, that she would put those together to finally complete the Rio Poneglyph at the end of One Piece. And then again, I'm not really going to go too far into detail with the ancient weapons, but we obviously later on learn that Poseidon isn't an actual thing, it's a person. And we learn that it's Princess Shirahoshi from the Fishman Islands. And she has the ability to control the Sea Kings, which is very appropriate considering the weapon is named Poseidon, the god of the sea. And so, yeah, it's interesting because Pluton, we learn, is an actual battleship, and it's not a person. So it is an actual weapon, a physical thing that can be used. And we'd obviously go on to learn much more about Pluton in the next couple arcs, where in Water 7, we learn that Iceberg, or actually not Iceberg, but Frankie has the blueprints to how to make Pluton. And we learn that it's a sort of a fail-safe, so that if something were to go wrong, that they could build Pluton and use it to fight back against the other weapons. But Frankie instead, obviously he trusts the Strawhats to protect Robin, and so he decides to burn the blueprints in NES Lobby. But we still don't quite know anything about the third weapon, the Uranus. And yeah, for as much as I've read One Piece, I still don't have quite a good theory on as to what the weapons are going to be used for, or why they were built in the first place. Like, I have, really loose things, but I'm not really going to mention them because I don't really have any concrete, actual evidence to back any of this up. But yeah, that's kind of all I really wanted to talk about on the spoilers. I guess there's one thing too. There's that line where Nami wonders, just as they leave Skypiea, it's like, will I, I wonder if we'll ever be back to Sky Island. And interestingly enough, she would eventually get to go back to a Sky Island in Witheria, where Kuma gets to, send her for her 2-year time skip training. I thought that was a really cool line that I didn't really catch until this rewatch. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Yeah, thanks for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode next year. Alrighty, Happy New Year and Happy Holidays. Bye.